In the classic words of Cersei Lannister from one of the greatest television series of all time, Game of Thrones, I choose violence. Carson Fox for you here for Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. And I'm all hot and bothered. Usually I am the most upbeat, positive, optimistic person you'll know, and I got a lot to be thankful for and a lot to be blessed with. But I am really, really annoyed by like Pitt throwing out these jabs on social media today, doing their schedule release. Just recently, they put out a graphic about how many victories Pitt has had over this school year over West Virginia football, men's basketball, and I think swimming came up, and it was the same day that Pitt beat West Virginia in wrestling. So it just gives more fuel to the fodder that you should never, ever, ever let up on the Pitt Panthers as rivals. I'm not one who likes to just throw shade at opponents after you beat them. It's not even like it's a way of winning with class. I'm just one of those kinds of people that it's like, okay, the game is over. I'm going to celebrate. You do not matter to me. I do not care about you. You are my rival. You are the team that I bested. But it just seems like just because it's, been a decade of, some losses, I can think definitely on the men's hardcourt baseball, but, now having 2 of 3 of the Backyard Brawl football series being revved back up, Pitt feels the need for whatever to stir the pot, cause some commotion. And it's a slow time of the year with only winter sports. Now the fall sports season being officially over. We haven't started into the spring sports. It's a slow time of the year. So what do I decide to do with my time? Go to good old Tier Maker, and I want to get into a debate here with you, Mountaineer Nation, on where do you see the most hated teams that West Virginia has played throughout its history. I'll say more modern history. As someone who works for a college that West Virginia used to play back 100 years ago, they're not modern rivals, not even close to the same divisions, so you can't count teams like that. But I've come up with this list here, and this predominantly means for football, but I kind of threw in some basketball things. We'll kind of spread that throughout here with a theme, but here's my list. I want to know if you agree with the way I have it from top all the way down to bottom, most hated, but kind of just like, all right, I'll give you some thoughts on here. So first and foremost, if you've ever watched the Player Haters Ball classic episode of Dave Chappelle's Chappelle Show in the mid-2000s, the category number 1 all time, the team that you wake up in the morning and you hope Oakland just implodes upon himself. I hope all the bad things in life happen to you and only you, are the Pitt Panthers. Not just because of 2007, but so many years of in between on the football field, the gridiron, the hard court, the baseball diamond. That is the team that you wake up and you just wish that would be fired off into the sun, are the Pitt Panthers. So I don't think there's any sort of argument there. Now it's in the second tier where I think there might be a little bit of argument for one team specifically to be either moved up a tier in with Pitt or in its own tier alone, and this is where my argument is going to come in. So second tier, these are the 4 schools that as a Mountaineer fan, you hate not as much as Pitt, but more so than just about everybody else. And I gave this category a name, historically and geographically based deep-seated dislike, because I don't like the word hate, but you get where I'm going. It's just as close. So number 2, Virginia Tech. For all of the battles that West Virginia had during its Big East days, strangely enough, it is Syracuse. Had to look this up. Syracuse has played West Virginia its second most. Oh, wait a second. No, I scratch that. Penn State having the second most, but then it was Syracuse, then Virginia, where Virginia Tech comes in. So I know people pretty much Central West Virginia South hate Virginia Tech as much, if not more, than West Virginia fans of northern West Virginia. And I feel like in the state of Pennsylvania and everywhere else, don't like Pittsburgh. But for everybody South Central disliking Blacksburg and Virginia Tech, completely understand how you might want to see them being moved up a tier. Virginia Tech, for the reasons that allegedly Frank Beamer made some sort of big hubbub back in the day to try and keep West Virginia out of the ACC when they were trying to join the conference. When Pitt and Syracuse abandoned the Big East, made it implode, and West Virginia was scrambling to try and find a conference. So, even though that West Virginia hadn't been in Virginia Tech's same conference, those battles, I think, in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, just was the thorn in the side of Frank Beamer, and just, some of the stories that you hear about, conspiracy theories online. Frank Beamer kind of, I feel like, is a disciple of the Pat Narduzzi propaganda of how West Virginia fans treat opposing teams and things of the like. So, but I would categorize Virginia Tech, if you're going to put them at number 2, right in that same tier with them, Penn State, Maryland, and Syracuse. Now, West Virginia obviously has not had the kind of success, and in fact, the complete opposite. 48 now, 59-2 now after this 2-game series that West Virginia just imploded, did not look good in both contests in Happy Valley and in Morgantown this past fall. Penn State is a team that you just kind of love to hate because they have that success. They have national championships. They have NFL pedigree, everything, and for really what I feel like you've experienced there in Central, State College versus what you kind of experience geographically, landscape. Penn State and Virginia Tech, or in West Virginia, I feel like aren't all that dissimilar in terms of topography, Appalachian culture, things of that nature. Now there is that, Pennsylvania, I feel like, I don't want to call it arrogance, but it's just like Penn State is its own cult. They are their own breed of people who bleed, blue and white, and have very high opinion of themselves and their university, and to only be matched by Ohio State and the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. So they don't even care about West Virginia, even though we've played so many years and they've beat West Virginia down. But thankfully, West Virginia does have 1988, and thank God that Joe Paterno didn't protest Mountaineer fans tearing down the goalposts with time still on the clock, allowing West Virginia to finish an undefeated regular season and go on to the Fiesta Bowl and play for a national championship. So appreciative of that note there from Joe Paterno, but just don't like Penn State, their ability to recruit. And then just their stranglehold, I feel like, on the entire Mid-Atlantic region. Virginia Tech probably thinks the same thing, Maryland, and Syracuse. And that's kind of where I'll keep the two together. West Virginia's had a lot of success against both of these programs, but have had their wars. I think the last couple of times West Virginia's played Syracuse in the 2012 or 2018 Camping World Bowl that Will Grier decided to sit out of, the 2012 Pinstripe Bowl in New York City that Syracuse unfortunately put down on Geno Smith, Tavon Austin, and Stedman Bailey. You can think back to the Bill Stewart years, the loss, the unacceptable losing to both Syracuse and UConn in the same season to not win a Big East championship, kind of ultimately doomed Bill Stewart in his tenure as head coach, but also on the basketball court, the Jim Boeheim era battles that West Virginia has had with Syracuse on the hard court. Syracuse beating, unfortunately, with Buddy Boeheim just a few seasons ago in the Sweet 16 round, or to get to the Sweet 16, when Syracuse just seems like play so mediocrely throughout the regular season and then just get completely hot in the NCAA tournament. It just drives me up a wall. So No, we haven't played in very, very long, other than those couple of bowl games and then they're in the NCAA tournaments, but just don't like the orange. I would say definitely a peg below the other three, but given the history, I'm sure folks who are of an older generation than myself would say, yeah, Syracuse is right alongside there. And Maryland. There is just like kind of a strong influence there in the Western Panhandle, I feel like, where you kind of cross over between, I'm thinking like Garrett County, Maryland, where you got a strong Morgantown, West Virginia influence. You have your D.C., Baltimore, Maryland folks. You also have your Pennsylvania, Pitt, Penn State, all kind of coming together. And just having gone to that game in 2021, man, those twerps annoy me. There was one fan, I'll tell this story here real quick and carry on with my video. I got to give him credit. This was a pretty awesome, chant that he continued for all 4 quarters. He goes, West Virginia's okay. They're not great. They're okay. And he did this every freaking series for all 4 quarters. And just with the mediocre, subpar play of Jarrett Deggy, the defense on that day, Neil Brown's coaching, the season opener, not only did I have to watch West Virginia just completely piss that game away, I feel like, to those, fans that, again, just a similar kind of ACC superiority complex that Virginia Tech has, Syracuse has, Pitt has to a certain extent, but just Pitt being so close to us and having so much history, we, as I've said in a video last fall, is West Virginia and Pitt need each other, really, truly do, for the battle of supremacy that can last, all year, every year. But Maryland is right in there. Losing to them in the NCAA tournament just recently, 2 seasons ago. Again, the football losses, 2013. West Virginia had a lot of success under Rich Rodriguez there in those mid-2000s years against Maryland, 04, 05, 06, 07. So I would love to get the twerps back on the schedule, or somehow, some way that the chips would align that West Virginia could be in the same conference with all 5 of those teams in the second tier. So moving on to my third tier, I'm calling this tier the we were once in a conference together and you beat us in big games, so you're annoying and I don't like you. And these 3 can, not blue bloods, definitely Texas and Oklahoma, I would say more so than Miami, who's kind of been of a has-been program for the better part of, I feel like, 20 years now. But, those Big East battles that West Virginia had with Miami, I can think really vividly, the earliest that I can think of my lifetime, 2003, frickin' Kellen Winslow Jr., the soldier that he was, weirdo. Catching that first down pass when West Virginia with Quincy Wilson, that incredible run that he had to take the lead down there in the Orange Bowl, to only come up short because of frickin' Kellen Winslow. Man, you really just love to see Miami losing to them in the 2016 Champ Sports Bowl led by Skylar Howard. Really was hoping that could have been a year that West Virginia could have stuck it to them. Haven't really had the opportunity ever since to face off in some other sports. And then what can you say about the battles of the Big 12 first decade against Oklahoma and Texas? West Virginia obviously having more success on the field, football related, over Texas than Oklahoma, not finally getting that win against the Sooners until the last time that West Virginia played them. So many times, so many chances, West Virginia had that opportunity to, either win or get in a part of a Big 12 championship game with a victory over OU, and just against Texas. I mean, it all kind of culminated, I feel like, in that 2018 game with Will Grier on the road at Darrell K. Royal Stadium, but also in other sports, both Oklahoma and Texas. Baseball, they and basketball, just seems like because they have the money, even more so, I feel like now that they're SEC opponents, but then they just had this egotistical aura about themselves, and give it to them. I mean, if you have the money, you have the success, you can feel the way you want to feel as a program. But just, man, you could feel it. It was that sense of I've always said, and like, if you're tuning into this video and you know me and you're from the state of Texas, like, I'm trying not to paint with a broad brush here, but there is a sense in the state of Texas that the country of Texas's borders, end, in the north, south, east, and west, and Texas is its own country, and they would rather root for another Texas-based school, even if it's a Texas A&M or Texas Tech, TCU, like when they played for the national championship a couple of years ago, Baylor in the New Year's Six Bowls. Texas schools support each other unlike anywhere else I feel like I've ever seen. Like, you go down in the state of Florida and they all hate each other. Just as long as they're not playing Texas, but it just seems like they, all root for each other. And then they hate Oklahoma, so Oklahoma has this chip on its shoulder against the world. So that's what I would say. Oklahoma, Texas, Miami, kind of hate all three of them, just below that second tier. So then the next tier, we've had some great battles in the past, but need more to move up a tier. So the team I'm going to pick out of this tier is Louisville. West Virginia had some great battles there in the mid-2000s, both in football and men's basketball. And from what I've heard from some fans, those people down there in Louisville are feisty. They are contentious. They with their cards chant that they do practically all game long. Going to one of their games on the road is more annoying than the old Panther meow that they had at Heinz Stadium. So Louisville, I feel like, is that one team that I feel like could get moved up a tier, but because West Virginia had such that short history there in the Big East Conference, I'd, again, love to have Louisville more on the schedule from a non-conference perspective, or if some way, shape, or form that West Virginia could find itself either in a conference or regularly playing Louisville. I think right there behind them for kind of the older timers, I would say, my age and older, Boston College, there were some great rivalries there. Even predating the Big East, can think back to when Doug Flutie was there, but also 1993 was a great, I think then the Big East was in its first or second year. Great battles into the early 2000s before then Boston College really tanked and have kind of been an irrelevant program. But I would think out of this other tier, you got two teams out of the Big 12 conference. I feel like that West Virginia has developed some either dislike or, just some battles back and forth. And I think like TCU and Baylor are those teams. TCU and Baylor, especially, or Baylor, let's talk about first. When West Virginia goes on the road, ooh, man, you never know what to expect. Whenever it's in Morgantown, up until this past fall, West Virginia was undefeated against Baylor. So now that they have that victory, we've seen the way that the battles go down there in Waco. I think it all started back in 2012, that 70-63 electric, magnificent game that all started it off, and then the dislike for Baylor, which, if you want to call them a dirty program off the field for what happened during there under Art Briles, I think they've really tried to clean up their image and really have done a successful job there now, at least in the last 5 to 8 years since Art Briles has been gone. I would count that, but TCU, for as dirty as Baylor was off the field, TCU's as dirty on the field. How many times does West Virginia play those Horned Frogs and guys get eye gouged like they did down in Fort Worth last year, or chop blocked, or just crazy like weird penalties happen? You can think back to the no call against Clint Trickett in 2014 where he got his head almost ripped off his shoulder blades. 2017, maybe one of the top 5 worst calls that I've ever seen in a football game is when David Sills got called for offensive pass interference, getting absolutely mugged down the field in 2017, and the Big 12 refs practically handed TCU the game. So Don't like them, don't like Baylor. And then two other teams, one now that's in the Big 12, one who is not in the same conference, that West Virginia had some great battles with, and that's Cincinnati and South Florida. I don't want to steal my thunder of a video I kind of want to also make, maybe as part of a double feature with this video. But USF, man, they were a thorn in the side of those Rich Rodriguez era teams in the mid 2000s, and just until Jim Leavitt decided to hit that kid in the locker room, and ended up getting fired because of that altercation. South Florida was what I think UCF has now become. I think had that incident never happened and or USF would have just swept that under a rug, let things continue, I think USF would have ended up getting that invitation to the Big 12 conference over UCF, but they just never continued that success to the degree that they had under the Matt Grothe into BJ Daniels era, Ben Moffitt, George Selvey on the other side, Mike Jenkins. So USF, don't like them, even though they're now, I think, in the American Conference. West Virginia doesn't really play them. And then Cincinnati, Zach Collaros, Tony Pike, Brian Kelly led Cincinnati teams that, again, West Virginia had some good battles with. Also on the men's basketball court, Cincinnati, I feel like more so even of a basketball school than it is a football school. So West Virginia on the basketball court has had some battles with there. And even last year, thankfully West Virginia on the baseball diamond was able to pick it back up, but I think either lost the series or got swept on the road in a very pivotal, in the mid stretch of the conference baseball schedule this past spring. So, the Bearcats trying to always ruin West Virginia's hopes. Seems like Cincinnati has tried to develop more of a rivalry with Pitt, which is great. To have those two teams go after each other just like they did there in the late 2000s, early 2010s, before Kelly left for Notre Dame. So fine with them kind of trying to be more primary or secondary rivals, but with Cincinnati's close proximity, 4.5 hours, you want to call it like that, to Morgantown, West Virginia is Cincinnati's closest Big 12 opponent. So, if you want to carry over some of that history from, West Virginia even played Cincinnati there, and I think was 2003 or 2002, and Cincinnati upset them when they were still a Conference USA team, then got into the Big East, now into the Big 12. So always fun to take down those Bearcats. And what the heck even is a Bearcat anyway? So next tier down, I'm going big brands that are geographically nearby, so I don't like you, even though we really don't have much of a history. And out of this tier, I'm putting Kentucky, I'm putting Ohio State, I'm putting Tennessee, and I'm putting Notre Dame. So Kentucky makes a lot of sense just because West Virginia and Kentucky are contiguous states, and though I'm up here across the border in Pennsylvania, I'm sure that the folks down there in Huntington and the southwestern region of West Virginia feel it there with Big Blue Nation. You can definitely get that sense even in this city of Cincinnati, right across the border with Kentucky, that there is a big presence there of Kentucky fans. And they are a monster on the basketball court. West Virginia got them there in the Elite Eight there in 2010 to go to the Big Ten or the Final Four. Kentucky getting West Virginia back in a regular season matchup. What was that, about 5 seasons ago, when John Calipari came in for Bob Huggins' fish fry charity event. So Kentucky has the most recent laugh. Also on the baseball diamond, Kentucky beat West Virginia in a regional just a couple of seasons ago. And because Kentucky has that SEC presence, they have money, they have investment down there in Lexington, I'm sure if West Virginia had more crossover with Kentucky, they would think of themselves more so than they do West Virginia. And even that, too, I feel like a louder, bolder, brasher extent is Tennessee. And this came out, I feel like, evidently on social media in 2018, when Tennessee was still, I think, marred by I think they were in the changeover to a new head coach whose name escapes me there at the start of 2018 ended up getting fired because of recruiting violations with cash and McDonald's bags, and his wife was bringing him. Old defensive coordinator for Alabama. Anyway, Tennessee was just really annoying, I feel like, there in 2018. Thinking West Virginia, said some things online that West Virginia had no chance, all the types of stereotypes that you would ever hear. And it's like, what are you talking about? You're Tennessee. Come on now. It's still, similarly, like I feel like to Miami, making the college football playoff this year, but have been, for the majority of my lifetime, a has-been program. Now, because of the money they're investing into football, have a presence in men's basketball. We're the number one team in baseball just a couple of years ago. Tennessee's big. They're bold. They're in those kind of like northern region of the South, mid-Atlantic there. Tennessee, I'm sure, sees itself as the power in that neck of the woods. But, kind of there in the middle, more so than a North Carolina, more so than an NC State, Virginia Tech, Kentucky to its north. But then as you creep up in there to Ohio, and also Penn State having to compete with them. So then two other teams are more northern region teams. Notre Dame, always because of that 1988 national championship with the Lou Holtz led head coach, even though, Lou Holtz very sympathetic, or not empathetic, or I would just say supportive of West Virginia throughout the decades, can always love the times that he would be on ESPN programming with Mark Madden and would try to throw shots at him over West Virginia. So not so much so, but back then, there in the 80s, read the Sports Illustrated article previewing the 1988 national championship game, and if you have a copy of that or know someone who does and you've never read it before, I highly encourage you to go back and read that article, because man, will that give you a really interesting, I feel like, opinion and insight on what college football even was like then. And that was 37 years ago now at this point, so not all that long. Just thinking West Virginia just being some backwoods program that did not belong whatsoever there in 1988. Yeah, that was their first national championship game, but won't ever like Notre Dame because of knowing that, even though I wasn't born at that point in time. And then some of their battles in the Big East. Haven't played in football, I don't think, in my lifetime, so don't really have that to say, but definitely in the other sports. And then Ohio State is just, if you want to call them the most recent now national champion, they are maybe the number one blue blood in college football, right alongside Notre Dame, Michigan, Alabama, Texas, and Oklahoma. Top 5 winningest programs in college, top 6 in college football history. And, bordering the state of West Virginia. You get a lot of crossover there, especially in the northern panhandle, like north central West Virginia. A lot of I swear, you step over the border into the state of Ohio. Doesn't matter whether you went there, anybody who are related to anybody who went there. Just everybody in that entire freaking state is an Ohio State fan for whatever reason. Just bleed scarlet and gray. Go buck nuts for the Bucks, and they got a lot going for them. They're really the northern power in college football these days. Hard to recruit against them for my entire lifetime. Already now have Chris Henry's son, Chris Henry Jr., a 5-star committed for next year's recruiting class. It's hard to beat Ohio State, so you just don't like them because of that fact. Very similarly, but in its own tier, is Michigan, because you took John Beilein and then you took Rich Rodriguez all within a calendar year. It was like, who else were you trying to take at that time? Nikki Izzo-Brown for women's soccer. At that point, I don't think you wanted Greg Van Zant in baseball at that point in time, but probably wanted to, or at least had him for a phone call interview at that point in time. So forever, because of 2007, I will not like Michigan. That was kind of a team because of my, having so many family who were Ohio State fans who live in the state of Ohio, kind of, 3/4 West Virginia fans or or less, and then a quarter Ohio State fans, because again, if you lived in Ohio, you gotta love Ohio State. I was, growing up before 2007, I'd hope, or would root for Michigan. Actually, if you remember back at the old, it's still there, the Morgantown Mall, but the old Stephen Barry's store, gonna bring that name up for you. That might trigger some awesome memories. That Stephen Barry store had awesome t-shirts, coats, shoes, you name it, all for extremely cheap prices. The best thing ever were their coats, and I had an awesome like $10 Michigan one. Had Wolverines down the arm, big logo on the back, almost looked like a Letterman's jacket with the big Michigan logo on the front. After 2007, donated that to Goodwill. Never wanted to wear that for the rest of my lifetime. So Michigan in its own category, do not like Big Blue, do not root for them. But again, because West Virginia doesn't have really any sort of history with them, can't like them. Next tier is Marshall. Marshall's in its own tier. I know Marshall makes things competitive and interesting in some of these, I'll call them other sports. Men's soccer, it seems like most recently. Also, baseball, West Virginia is going to play a 3-game series with the Thundering Herd this upcoming spring. But most recently in men's basketball, West Virginia beat them in the NCAA tournament. On the football, on the football field, West Virginia is still undefeated. In its, I think, over a dozen times West Virginia has played Marshall throughout the years. So it's just like, I wish, though, because listening to some other podcasters on YouTube, YouTube content creators talking about how you wish West Virginia had a little bit more of a relationship with Marshall in some way, shapes, or form for men's basketball and football because of the in-state rivalry that's not really a rivalry. I get it for all of the perspective that there's nothing really to gain competitively for West Virginia to play Marshall with everything to lose. Just like it almost happened there in, what was that year, 2010, 2011? It was Bill Stewart's, I think it was 2010 down there in Huntington. Geno Smith's first year starting. That Will Johnson, thank God, caught that ball and Marshall's kicker missed the field goal. But anyway, that's what I mean, is if you lose to Marshall, Marshall will always have that against you, use that against you in the competitive banter. And I see it less so even from the extent that Penn State and Pitt have, Pitt fans have that consternation, have that adversarial feel against Penn State because Penn State won't play Pitt. And if you consider, and I would probably agree, Penn State is in a tier better, at least in football, than Pitt in today's modern era. I know that Pitt had that win at Heinz Field there in 2016, so I get it. But that's what I mean is Pitt has a reasonable argument to make that it should play Penn State more frequently. I don't think Marshall really has a case. We're talking about the school, from the school, like enrollment and size and just facilities, competitive player that it recruits. It's just it's not close. It's not close. And I know that Marshall's had a lot of success already coming over from what were they previously? They were in Conference USA, moving over to the Sun Belt. I think they won 10 games this season. Great. Awesome for them. I think it's like a good story in and of itself for themselves. But to have this kind of, we want to, look little brother to big brother feel, okay, name the time, name the place, let's do it, you'll get crushed. That's why I feel like West Virginia should, as I made this video about a year or so ago, West Virginia should play Marshall in the spring game, a game that does not go against any team's record, sell out Milan Puskar Stadium, make it like an entire, state of West Virginia fair, awesome day in, mid to late April, bring all the in-state recruits up to Morgantown, again, play it at Milan Puskar Stadium, and you get to hit players with another jersey while also scouting a couple of Marshall's players for the transfer portal. I laid it out in that video last spring. You can go find it on the archives here on my channel of all the reasons I lay out that I think that West Virginia playing Marshall in the spring game, where it doesn't count, it's an exhibition, would be beneficial. But for now, they're in their own territory that you just don't like them, but you can't hate them all that much, really. Next, very bottom, even below Marshall, I feel like, are what I would deem our current or past conference opponents who I've come to really not like, but I'm closer to indifference to. And a couple of schools that I would add that I didn't have because of Tier Maker didn't have their logos for college football are Villanova and Georgetown. I would add those two schools up on that list just because of the old Big East rivalries that West Virginia's had. West Virginia losing to Villanova, what was it there in the 2018 Elite Eight? Sweet 16 to go to the Elite Eight with Javon Carter, Dexter Miles. Best game of that NCAA tournament, even better than the national championship game in which Villanova won. West Virginia gave the Wildcats their best battle of that tournament that year. So I'd put Georgetown, I'd put Villanova in with them. Some other teams, UConn, same kind of category, I feel like. More so you don't like because of basketball than football. Don't really have that history. A couple other basketball schools that I would put in up above them. Then football, I would say. Kansas and Iowa State. I know West Virginia's had more of a competitive battle on the football field with Iowa State more recently. But basketball, it seems like, is where they really have good battles. Same with Kansas, especially when the game is played in Morgantown. I know, thankfully, West Virginia finally got its first win in Fog Allen Fieldhouse there earlier, or December 31st, so that was awesome to see. So Iowa State, Kansas, don't like them because of basketball. Houston, it's because of the Dana Holgerson factor. Now I know he's been fired, no longer there. Don't really have that animosity, but just while it still lingers fresh from 2019 till now, that Houston, having Dana Holgerson as its head coach, I'm not going to say stealing him away, because again, seemed more of a parting of the ways between Shane Lyons, WVU, and Dana Holgerson when that happened after the 2018 football season. But with Houston winning that game in 2013 on a Hail Mary, don't like them for that. And there is, I feel like, a budding rivalry brewing up. I know we're talking about a game tomorrow between West Virginia and Houston on the hard court. So Houston coming on strong here already in the Big 12 Conference in year 2. So then some other teams that I feel like, Texas Tech has been really, really tough. I might put them the leader in the pack in this category. Can't put them in the same tier as, say, a Baylor or a TCU. And I've heard the same kind of thing about Lubbock and Texas Tech fans as I've heard about Louisville. Is just the fans down there are nasty, would not take their family down there to Lubbock. They're just rabid. Not only just because of the tortillas, but just, really go after fans from opposing teams down there at Texas Tech. They've beaten West Virginia plenty of times, both on the road and in Morgantown. Also in basketball, baseball, they've been a tough team to compete with. So Texas Tech, even though has kind of been the redheaded stepchild, it seemed, they use that old cliche of the past Big 12, are trying to assert their dominance now in the Big 12, the new age Big 12 it is, with all the investments they're making into NIL resources, facility improvements, coaching hires. They're trying to be the leader in the Big 12, and West Virginia has to keep up with Texas Tech. Can't let them pass West Virginia up. Rutgers, West Virginia just owned Rutgers, I feel like, in those Big East days. But didn't want to forget about them. Have to have them on this list. So just love those competitive battles there in the Big East days. Namely 2006 when Jarrett Brown had his legacy game. Also K-State. K-State's been really tough, just like Texas Tech has. But again, same with Kansas, same with Iowa State, same with Texas Tech, Houston, you name it. I can't have the kind of animosity that I have toward a team like them as I do, say, a Virginia Tech, a Maryland, a Syracuse. I'm sorry. I never encounter you. I when I go to the grocery store, I might see a guy with a Syracuse hat or hoodie on. I might see someone with Maryland when I'm vacationing or doing something down at Deep Creek Lake. If I'm like I was this past summer down at the Outer Banks in North Carolina, people see me in my West Virginia T-shirts or jerseys, and they're in their Virginia Tech gear, and I get a sneer at the ice cream shop. Like that is where I'm experiencing the team. I've never bumped into a K-State fan or a Texas Tech fan or a Houston fan or anything like that. So again, it's just, and I've reiterated this many a time, so I don't want to really belabor the point, is just that West Virginia has truly not developed any sort of rivalries to the same kind of extent and dislike that we had against its former Big East opponents, or when West Virginia wasn't a part of the Big East, than it does these teams from the Midwest Great Plains states. And that'll never happen. I'm sorry, just West Virginia and Kansas State or West Virginia and Iowa State will never. The Riot Bowl that you hear about on social media is kind of funny, but you get what I'm saying. West Virginia will always have these built-in geographically based rivalries that you will love to jag your Pitt fan friends and neighbors over, more so than these Big 12 opponents. So for that reason, among many reasons, I hope that West Virginia is not a part of the Big 12 conference, or a new conference that contains some of its eastern schools that it loved to do battle with. Last but not least, I don't really want to forget them, and there's very little history, even though that's a school that shares half the same name. I'm calling them East Virginia for this trolling part, and that's what that's where I'll consider them on in their basement territory there. It's East Virginia, who seems to get credit for Country Roads, the song by John Denver, when internet trolls want to try and jag West Virginia. I know it's Pitt fans, I know it's Virginia Tech fans, Maryland fans, but a school in Virginia that West Virginia, again, has not played a whole lot of. And I think it's because of that ACC elitism, not wanting to schedule. Now, thankfully, West Virginia is playing Virginia in a non-conference game, in 2027? It's pretty soon here. That the game, I think, is being played a neutral site game played in Charlotte, North Carolina, between West Virginia and Virginia. So okay, we're gonna draw a giant L. You guys come west, we'll come south, and we'll meet there and play this game. So that's the thing. Like, I don't know why. Again, West Virginia to Virginia. Why don't we play more often? This is one of the first memories that I have as a West Virginia football fan. So what was I, 9 years old, something like that? The 2002 Continental Tire Bowl. Rich Rodriguez's second season. Avon Coburn did everything he possibly could to try and win West Virginia that game, but just not enough offensively, defensively. Young Rasheed Marshall in that contest. The Cavaliers came away with a victory. Other than that, when is West Virginia and Virginia played? I think it was a game at Madison Square Garden, regular season men's basketball game there in 2016, when West Virginia was just starting to get rolling with the Press Virginia kind of movement, system under Bob Huggins. So we can, recount back on that. But other than that, I really wish West Virginia and Virginia played more frequently, because share a border, share the history up until the Civil War. Excuse me. We should play more frequently. Why aren't we friends? So what do you think of that list? Am I missing anybody? That's 17, 19 teams right there. Really, as a West Virginia fan, you wake loving the old gold and blue. You eat, sleep, breathe, die for the old gold and blue. But you also live to root against all of these teams that I'm listing here on this list. So, where do you think I got the tiers wrong? Am I completely missing some teams? Would you move some teams around? What do you think of this list? This is from, most hated up there with Pitt, all the way down to Virginia, down at the bottom, and everyone in between. So love to know your comments, good, bad, or indifferent. Hope you like this video. Please like it if you do. Again, choosing violence here on a Tuesday in January. Slow day in the West Virginia news world. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll be back. Got another idea brewing about football I want to talk about in a video, or if worst case scenario, I am going to come back and recap the month of January for men's basketball, talk about all of the games that the Mountaineers have been playing in this month, and hopefully they come away with a victory tomorrow evening against the Houston Cougars at home in a Stripe the Stadium game. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.